Who do you think, in your heart of hearts, no bias, is going to win the NBA championship this season? I'll give you a second, pause the video if you have to, and go ahead and comment it down below. Okay, now the most popular answer is going to be between two teams. The two teams that both just traded with Portland to get themselves an all-star point guard. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics. Some betting sites have Boston favored, some have Milwaukee favored, some have them at even odds. From what I can tell though, the most popular answer from the betting sites is the Boston Celtics to win it all come the end of the year. Although they were also the preseason favorite last year too, and they weren't the ones that went home with the rings. Predicting which team out of the 30 is going to win come the end of the year isn't easy. So if your team isn't one of those two, don't worry, you still have a chance. But how good of a chance? That's what I wondered. I wanted to know how often the preseason odds makers get it right. Back in the days of the big dynasties, it was naturally a lot easier to predict the winner. The records go back to the 1984-85 season, and from then to 02-03, preseason favorite won the finals a little over half the time, Michael Jordan being a major reason why. So be grateful for the parity we have in the league today. I wanted to look at the past 20 years of preseason favorites for a little more relevant data. Let's go back in time to 2003. The odds makers gave Tim Duncan and the reigning champions a little bit of love going into the 2003-2004 season, but favored the Lakers just a little more after their additions of Karl Malone and Gary Payton. The start of the season was the opposite of the previous year, going 18-3, including 3 wins over the reigning champs. But the Lakers' issues piled throughout the season. Kobe's Colorado trial made him miss games, Gary Payton didn't do well in the new triangle offense, Karl Malone only played half the year, and the Shaq and Kobe public feud overshadowed the play on the court. Despite all the drama, they were still good enough to clinch the second seed. With everyone healthy and on the court, they rolled through the Rockets, got revenge on the Spurs for taking them out in last year's Western Conference Finals, and took out Garnett's Timberwolves to get back to the finals. But the issues with the team finally reared their head when they faced adversity for the first time against the Pistons. And after just 5 games, Detroit made the odds makers' prediction a wrong one. At the start of the year, the Pistons only had the 7th best odds at the championship. And yet, they were the ones going home with the Larry O'Brien. With the Lakers breaking apart in the offseason, the preseason odds shifted to San Antonio, with the champions not getting all that much respect, down at 5th best. Tim Duncan and the Spurs, in classic San Antonio fashion, didn't make it all that dramatic throughout the season, finishing with the 2nd best record in the West. They rolled into the Western Conference Finals without much resistance to face the MVP-led, top-seeded Suns in what was supposed to be a good matchup, but ended in Game 5 with a Spurs victory. The Pistons almost made the odds pay again for their disrespect as the finals came down to a Game 7. But after that Game 7, the odds makers had finally got their first one right, with the Spurs winning it all. Looking to go back-to-back on preseason favorites, the odds makers picked the Spurs to go back-to-back entering the 05-06 season. This year, it wasn't just Duncan and company. In fact, he didn't even lead his team in points per game. Tony Parker took a step up to do that, and in doing so, made his first All-Star game alongside the big fundamental. With those two leading the way, they cruised to a 1 seed at 63-19. They took care of business in the first round against the Kings, and just skated by in Game 1 of the second round against the Mavs. It might have been up 1-0, but the Mavericks tasted weakness and exposed it in Game 2. Game 3 in Dallas was a lot closer, but ended with the same result. And Game 4 would drop them down 3-1 in the series. They clawed their way back with close wins in Games 5 and 6, but even with 41 from Duncan in the series decider, the Mavericks pulled off the upset on their way to a finals appearance. The finals where they would lose to the team with the 2nd best odds at the start of the year, the Wade and Shaq Miami Heat. The Heat didn't get that same respect entering the next year's preseason rankings though, falling to 3rd best odds, with the team they beat in the finals, the Mavericks, sitting as the preseason favorites. And by the end of the regular season, the pick looked like the right call. Dallas was far and away the best team in the league with a 67-15 record, captained by the league's MVP Dirk Nowitzki. But in one of the most shocking upsets in recent playoff history, Dirk put up a stinker of a series, and the Baron Davis-led 8-seed Warriors took the team most people expected to win it all down in 6 games. Without the Mavs in their way, the Spurs ran through the Western Conference and demolished the Cavs team that LeBron had carried to the finals. And once again, the team with the second best odds at the start of the year ended it by raising a banner. The Spurs opened the 07-08 season as joint favorites, tied with another, as the Mavs' postseason collapse didn't stop the odds makers from putting their belief in them again, having them on even odds with the champs. The reigning champs eclipsed the 50-win mark for the 9th straight season with a record of 56-26. The Mavs not too far behind at 51-31. But in a stacked Western Conference, that was only good enough for a 3rd and 7th seed. Even as the 7th seed though, the Mavs had high hopes, as they made a midseason acquisition of all-star Jason Kidd. But he was nowhere to be seen in their first-round matchup against the young, upstart New Orleans Hornets. Kidd might have been the best point guard in the league at one point, but the league's new best point guard, Chris Paul, sent the Mavericks home in 5. After the Spurs took down the Suns in the first round, those Hornets would be who they would have to match up against in the second round. The series was back and forth, with the home team winning all of the first 6 games. Game 7 back in New Orleans didn't go the same way though, with the Spurs finally getting the best of those young Hornets. But the fact that it took them 7 games to do so didn't exactly spell out confidence for their matchup against the top-seeded Lakers. While 3 of the 4 losses were close ones, the series was over in just 5 games, as Kobe could not be contained. The Lakers started the season with just the 16th best odds to win a title, as they didn't trade for Pau Gasol until the middle of the season. But it would actually end up being the team with the 5th best odds at the start of the year that would go home with the championship, Boston Celtics. 08-09 opened with those 2 rivals at even odds for the preseason pick, and both teams did not disappoint in the regular season. The Celtics started the year 27-2, and both teams entered the All-Star break in first place in their conferences. Kobe and Pau were All-Stars for the Lakers, the big 3 of Pierce, Garnett, and Allen for the C's. Unfortunately, not too long after, KG would suffer a season-ending injury that pretty much doomed the Celtics. They still managed to hold on for a 2nd seed and scraped by the Bulls in the first round. But without him, lost to the Magic in 7 games. The Lakers would meet that Dwight Howard-led Magic team in the finals after series wins over the Jazz, Rockets, and Nuggets. This joint favorite would pull out the win in a series that was actually a lot closer than the 5 games would suggest. In the offseason, the champions replaced Trevor Ariza with Ron Artest and entered the 2009-2010 season as favorites to defend their title successfully. Their record wasn't as good as the year before, but it was still good enough for the number 1 seed in a competitive Western Conference. They would have to go through that tough West to get a chance to go back-to-back. That's exactly what they did, taking out a young Thunder team in 6, sweeping the Jazz, and ending Phoenix's best shot at a ring since Nash got there. They entered the 2010 finals looking to avenge that 2008 loss with a rematch against their rivals, Celtics. This series was an all-time classic. The Lakers went up 2-1, but then back-to-back Celtics victories put the reigning champs' backs against the ropes. They held the Celtics to just 67 points in Game 6, and it was more of that gritty defensive style of basketball in Game 7. Kobe was inefficient, but so was everybody. But it would be an unexpected Ron Artest dagger 3 that would help the Lakers and the odds makers go back-to-back. The Lakers would have gone into the 2010-11 season as the favorites again for the 3rd straight year if it wasn't for LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh forming the best big 3 the league had ever seen down in Miami. The most hyped team, possibly of all time, got off to a slow 9-8 start. After that though, they were almost as good as advertised. It would have been hard to be as good as advertised. People were talking about like 70 wins. They might not have reached that, but they got to a respectable 58-24 record, good enough for 2nd in the East, only behind Chicago and MVP Derrick Rose. They rolled through the 8-seed Sixers and the aging Celtics, both in 5 games, before meeting D. Rose in the Eastern Conference Finals. Many thought the series could be a close one, with David actually having a chance at taking down Goliath, especially after Game 1 resulted in a blowout Bulls victory. But after that, it was all Miami, ending the series in just as many games as the first two. This dominance would not be the same case in the finals though. We didn't get the LeBron-Kobe matchup that everyone was hoping for, but what we did get was still pretty legendary. The Heat jumped out to a 2-1 lead, and entering Game 4, it looked like a 3-1 lead was imminent, with Dirk Nowitzki dealing with an illness that some on Miami thought was a little exaggerated. Regardless, LeBron played like the one with the fever, while Dirk's 21 was enough in a low-scoring affair. After the clip of Wade and LeBron making fun of Dirk's supposed illness kinda went viral, that might have been the motivating factor behind the Mavs' next 2 wins to seal their first championship. Even with that finals loss, Miami would still go into the next 3 seasons as the heavy favorites. 2011-12, they would finish second behind the Bulls again. With D Rose's injury in the first round, it looked like their path back to the finals was going to be an easy one. But a scare against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals pushed them to a Game 7. With the original Big Three not in their primes anymore though, Rajon Rondo just was not enough, especially when he was forced to be the scorer to take down Miami, who headed back to the finals to face off against an extremely young Thunder team. A Thunder team that shocked everyone in Game 1 behind KD's 36 points. Their youth showed though in Games 2 through 5, as even though they kept them close, they just couldn't keep up with Bron and Wade, who finally broke through for a ring. The next year in the playoffs, this time as the 1 seed, they swept the Bucks, took down the Roseless Bulls in 5, before going back and forth with Paul George's Indiana Pacers. Pushed all the way to a Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals again, it would again be the Heat coming out on top. This time facing off in the finals against the dying dynasty of San Antonio, this was thought to be an easy win for Miami, but after losing Game 1, the two teams traded blowouts for the next 4 games, seeing the Spurs up 3-2. But in Game 6, you already know the story. Ray Allen saves the day, and possibly LeBron's legacy forces a Game 7, where LeBron beats the choker allegations and wins ring number 2, and adds another win, the preseason favorites. And in 2013-14, they would again match up against the Spurs in the finals, but it felt like much less of a Big Three in Miami and much more of LeBron and company this year. And against a San Antonio squad that was built for depth and now had a lockdown defender to follow LeBron around the court, that just wasn't enough. And those Heatles fell in 5 to the Spurs, who started the season as only having the 6th best odds at the chip. LeBron in the offseason would part ways with Miami and head back to Cleveland! Spoilers! We're not there yet! He would head back to Cleveland and immediately made them the preseason favorite for the title. Now with fellow All-Stars Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving at his side, LeBron led the Cavs to a rough 19-20 start before rebounding to a 53-29 record to end the season as the 2nd seed. They swept the Celtics in the first and took out Chicago in 6 before embarrassing the very fraudulent top-seeded Hawks in a 4-game sweep in the Eastern Conference Finals to find their way into the finals. There, they would meet the team that finished the year with the best record in the NBA, the Golden State Warriors, led by MVP Steph Curry. The series was a competitive one, with the Cavs finding themselves up 2-1 after 3, despite losing Kyrie and Love to injuries. But the Warriors' 3-point shooting was just too much for Cleveland, and they would win the next 3 to clinch the series win. By the way, never forget, if Timofey Mozgov can lead an NBA Finals game in scoring, a game that had LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, you can do anything. I was surprised to see that even after a 67-win season and a championship, the Warriors weren't the preseason favorite entering the 2015-16 season. It was still the Cavs. I guess the fact that they took them to 6 games even though they didn't have Kyrie or Kevin Love for the series, maybe had some people believing in the fact that with a fully healthy squad, they could have taken them down. By the time the playoffs came around though, that thought was very much in doubt. The Cavs finished with a very respectable 1-seed earning 57-25 record, but that paled in comparison to the Warriors' all-time record-setting 73-9 season. The Cavs swept through the first 2 rounds before the start of the LeBronto saga saw the Cavs win in 6 to head back to the finals. The Warriors showed vulnerability for the first time this season in the Western Conference Finals, going down 3-1 to the Thunder, before clawing back 3 straight to face off with Cleveland again. Golden State this time built a 3-1 lead of their own before they blew it after a legendary Game 7. So even though at the start of the series, the Cavaliers were massive underdogs, at the start of the year, the preseason oddmakers got this one right by making them their favorite. They would not be the preseason pick again though, as Kevin Durant in the offseason signing with the 73-9 Warriors would make Golden State the odds-on favorite by a lot. The first time in 6 years that the preseason favorite would not be a team with LeBron on it. They were the juggernaut of juggernauts, clicked immediately and steamrolled their way to a 67-15 season. They swept through the Trailblazers, the Jazz, and the Spurs to face off against the Cavs in the finals for a third straight year. This time, with Kevin Durant though, it was nowhere near as competitive. Of course, the Warriors would be favored again, and again they would not disappoint, sitting at 51-14 by mid-March in a battle for the number 1 seed with the Harden-led Rockets. But injuries took them out of that race, including an MCL sprain to Steph that would keep him out of the last 17 games. And without him, they would finish the season 58-24. They headed into their first-round series against the new-look Spurs without Steph as well, but didn't have much trouble winning in 5. I guess that's the benefit of having 3 other All-Stars on the team. Steph finally returned in Game 3 of the second-round series against the Pelicans, a game that the Warriors would actually go on to lose, but that would be the only one in that series that they would lose, with it being over in 5 as well. Even without Kyrie in Cleveland now, a collision course still felt inevitable for these two again, but both were pushed to the brink, with both falling down 3-2 in the conference finals against the Rockets and the Celtics. And if it wasn't for an incredibly unfortunately timed Chris Paul injury, our 2017-18 preseason favorites could have fallen. But without him, MVP Harden just couldn't keep up. For a 4th straight year, the Cavs and Warriors met in the finals. But without Kyrie at his side, LeBron stood no chance, as the Warriors swept their way to a 3rd championship in 4 years and made it a three-peat for the preseason oddsmakers. But little spoiler alert, that'll be the last time they would get it right. Naturally, the preseason pick was for the Warriors to win a 3rd straight title. And even after a relatively pedestrian, at least for a super team, 57-25 record, they were still the heavy favorites heading into the playoffs. Golden State took out the other LA team in the first round, although it did take them 6 games to do it, and didn't have as much trouble this year with the Rockets, defeating them in 6 as well, losing KD to a calf strain in the process though. Even without him though, the Warriors swept through the Trailblazers to make it back to the finals for a 5th straight year. Still without last year's finals MVP, the Warriors split the first 2 games. And without both KD and Klay in Game 3, stood no chance against a 30-piece from Kawhi. Klay returned in Game 4, but the Warriors still fell to a 3-1 deficit. With their backs now against the wall, Durant returned in Game 5, which was probably a little too soon, and he played for all of 12 minutes before he would suffer another injury. This one far more serious. His 11 points did make a difference though in a 1-point win, extending the Warriors' season. But it would come to an end in Game 6 after Klay Thompson's ACL tear spelled doom for the dynasty. The dynasty imploded in the offseason, KD leaving for Brooklyn and Klay out for the year. So a new favorite was due. And who better to be the new favorite than last year's Finals MVP, Kawhi Leonard? Although this year it wouldn't be in Toronto, as even a championship couldn't keep him in Canada. Kawhi chose to sign with the Clippers in free agency, a signing he only agreed to under the condition that the team also trade for Paul George. Those two made the fraud LA team the preseason favorite, the real LA team, with Anthony Davis now alongside LeBron, as the 2nd best odds. The Clippers were really good all throughout the season, but the Lakers were just slightly better. The pandemic stopped the season in its tracks in March. After a 4-month hiatus, the season finished in the bubble, with the Clippers earning the 2nd seed. The 20-year-old Luka Doncic gave them some trouble in the first round, but Kawhi and PG managed to put them away in games 5 and 6, carrying that momentum into the second round against Denver, where they would find themselves up 3-1. But in classic Doc Rivers fashion, the Clippers couldn't close out the Nuggets despite large leads in both games 5 and 6. The Clippers again led at halftime of Game 7, but showed no fight in the second half, blowing that 3-1 lead. It turned out that the oddsmakers picked the wrong LA team. Cry about it all you want, the ring count's all the same. I don't want to hear it. Odds makers believe the ring was valid enough to name them their preseason favorites for the 2020-21 season. That season started just 72 games after last season's NBA Finals though. That short offseason didn't seem to hurt the Lakers that much though. Starting the season 21-7 and in second place before an AD injury, get used to that, left them without their star for the next 30 games. The Lakers treaded water without him before an injury to their other star left them to fend without both for a while. By the end of the year, they had plummeted to a 42-30 record that left them as the 7th seed, having to play in the inaugural play-in tournament. With James and AD back in the lineup again, they beat the Warriors on a LeBron game winner to earn a spot in the first round against the Suns. They lost game 1 after 34 points from the 24-year-old Devin Booker before back-to-back 34-point games from Anthony Davis helped put the Lakers up 2-1. But AD would suffer a groin strain in game 4, and without him to end that game and without him in game 5, the Lakers fell down 3-2. There was hope for the preseason favorites in Game 6 with Davis cleared to play, but he only managed 5.5 minutes before having to leave the game again. And without him, the reigning champs stood no chance. Those Suns would end up going all the way to the finals and leading 2-0 in the series before Giannis would make sure they wouldn't see another W. And the Bucks, who opened the season with the second best odds, were champions. It wasn't those Bucks or the Suns who opened the 2021-22 season as favorites though. Rather, it was the Brooklyn Nets, who had the first full season of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden all together. Or at least it was supposed to be. With the pandemic still in full effect, Kyrie still hadn't taken the vaccine, so he couldn't play games at home. Durant battled injuries, and things never really clicked. The trio barely ever got to play games together, and by mid-season, James Harden had already requested and was granted a trade to Philadelphia. Without the former MVP, the Nets limped into the playoffs as a 7 seed, where they got easily swept by the young Celtics. Those Celtics took down the reigning champs and the 1-seeded Miami Heat, both in Game 7s, but they wouldn't get a chance at a third Game 7 against the Warriors, as Steph would put the kids to bed in Game 6. The young potential of Boston still excited oddsmakers to start this past season, enough to name them as their preseason favorite even after losing their head coach. The Celtics were hailed as the deepest team in the league, boasting a lineup of all-stars Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Defensive Player of the Year candidate Marcus Smart, and Sixth Man of the Year Malcolm Brogdon. Even with the new coach, they finished the season 57-25, good enough for second in the East. Atlanta gave them some trouble in the first round, but they eventually got past the pesky Trae Young, just to find themselves in another slugfest. This time with the 76ers, even though MVP Joel Embiid wasn't playing his best. They fell down 3-2, but battled back to win in Game 7 behind Tatum's 51 points. And instead of having to face the 1-seed Bucks, they found themselves in a dream matchup against the 8-seeded Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals, until that dream turned into a nightmare, finding themselves in a 3-0 hole after 3 games. But with Jimmy Butler hobbled, they won the next 3 straight to force a Game 7. But the preseason pick just ran out of gas. Instead, it would be the team with only the 9th best odds that would take the Heat out in the finals, the Denver Nuggets. So here we find ourselves back at this year's preseason. The Bucks and Celtics at even odds to start the year. After all that, how should we feel about those picks? Well, the preseason favorite was only correct 8 times in the last 20 years. And a lot of those, about half of them, came in years where there was only one obvious consensus pick, like LeBron with the Heat or KD with the Warriors. Ever since that Golden State dynasty fell, we've been in an era of parody in the NBA. And in that 4-year era, not only has the preseason pick always been wrong, the preseason pick hasn't even made the finals. So as long as a dynasty doesn't pop up anytime soon, I still think a lot of teams have a shot. 82 games is a long season, especially now in this era of parity. And honestly, this is kind of exactly where I like it. It's a lot more fun going into the season not knowing who's gonna, let alone win at the end of the season, but I don't even know who's gonna make the finals. I think that's really fun, and I think that's really, really good for basketball. If you liked any of this content that you saw here today, want to see more over this 82 game season of content from me, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button, give me a like on this video if you like this content, and if you want to hear more stuff more often from me, I have a show called Worst Take. I'm hosting with 2 of my friends. I'll leave the channel link down in the description, as well as the link to the most recent video. I would really appreciate it if you would check it out. It's a lot of fun to record. We go for a little more comedy-driven stuff. I know a lot of you have clicked off the video already. I understand. If you are still here, I really appreciate you listening to my whole spiel. If you're still here, I think you'd like that content. If you'd like to hear me ramble. Anyways, if you don't do any of that, if you don't even leave a like on this video, that's fine. I just appreciate that you were here, that you watched the video. See you next time. Hopefully you hit the subscribe button to see my next video. I'll see you next time.